Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here again with another installment of my complete analysis of all 389 Bach chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Ach, was soll Sünder machen, which translates to, what shall I, a sinner, do? What a dramatic title. I understand that they were different times, and of course all these chorales are harmonizations of Lutheran melodies, so I include the title for the non-German speaking folks. It's also just interesting to make a linguistic connection with the music. That being said, pretty straightforward chorale, all things considered. I think we should just hop right into the analysis. Nothing really stuck out too much as a very interesting quirk about it. All the harmony more or less functions the way it's supposed to, and I think we should just hop right into it. 1 sharp in the key signature. We end on E major, which is like a Picardy third situation. We start on E minor, so I'm pretty convinced that we're in the key of E minor, but if we look ahead to our first cadence, we have a cadence in the key of G major, and it's imperfect authentic, because the tonic is not in the soprano, so we get a modulation pretty early on, and we have to decide where that's going to happen. But that being said, we still start in the key of E minor, passing tone in the bass, and then we get a G, G, B, and E. That's still E minor. That's an E minor triad, but this time the G's in the bass, so it's a first inversion E minor triad. Passing tone in the bass again, E, B, E, and G, again with E minor, but this time it's back in root position, and I don't reanalyze with Roman numerals. I just use a change in figured bass to signify the same Roman numeral changing inversion over time. Passing tone again in the bass, very active bass line for these first 2 measures. Actually, very active bass line throughout. And then we have C, B, E, and G. And I think there's an argument to be made here that this could be a 6-7 chord, but I think this C is an accented non-chord tone, and this B is really what I hear, because the triad in the top is what I hear as E minor still. And the bass doesn't really sound like it's changing to me, but I will provide both outlooks. So I'm going to go ahead and say my analysis is 6-4, and it's part of a passing figure, so 6-4, it's not impossible that we would see it in this context. But I think we could also call this a 6-7 chord as well, because we have all the components for it, C, B, E, and G. I kind of just lump the E minor in the upper voices, the upper 3 voices, or the upper voices and the tenor together. And the C is just such a brief moment that I'm really just hearing E minor for this entire phrase. Like if this C was a quarter note, there'd be no refuting it. It'd be a 6-7 chord, but with the B in such close proximity, it just sounds like E minor is on the mind. And then we have A, C, E, and A. And remember, we have to modulate at some point, so I think that this is where it's happening. So what is a 4 chord, an A minor triad here, is I think a 2 chord in the key of G major, which would be a predominant in anticipation for this cadence. Then we have F sharp, D, A, and A. That's a D major triad over F sharp, so it's a 5-6 chord, because we're in the key of G major now, which turns into 5-3 on the next 8th note, because we skip down to D, and this F sharp is still a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it. And then we have G, 2, 5, 1. Perfect. And all that happens is the bass leaps up. If we look ahead to the next cadence, we have another perfect authentic cadence, or we have another authentic cadence. This one happens to be perfect, and we're still in the key of G major. Even though the piece is in E minor, the fact that we get G major emphasis in the beginning is really interesting, actually. The fact that he modulates so quickly after the fact, and spends most of the time outside of the key of E minor throughout, so I guess that is the interesting part of the chorale, is that he's exploring keys other than E minor more or less the entire time. to me that kind of speaks like a comment on like modality, as the melody is somewhat modal, somewhat flexible in terms of how you would interpret it with through a tonal lens. G, D, G, and B, another one chord with a passing tone in the bass. B, D, G, and D. 1/6 chord, that's just G major over B. I'm starting to see some parallelism between the beginning of the first phrase and the beginning of the second phrase. Here we see a leap in the bass here, up a fourth, and this leaps down to B, or skips down to B, so that's still a chord tone. So this would turn this into 6, but I think it happens so briefly that it's not even really worth analyzing. F sharp, A, G, and C. What I think is happening here is that this F sharp is a chord tone. This G, I think, is a non-chord tone, and this is actually a D7 chord, F sharp, C sharp, and C sharp. But really what's being implied is a big 5 chord, D, D, F sharp, and C, with the F sharp in the bass. I'm just going to call that 5/6. This whole chord between the eighth notes and what's being played in close proximity to one another, I think a big dominant chord is what's being implied here. But this is actually an A in the bass, so this would be a 5/6/4 if we were thinking about it that way. So that being said, I'm going to have a change of heart here, and I am still going to mark that G as a non-chord tone, but we're actually going to call this 7/6. It makes more sense because a 6/4 chord here doesn't really make sense. Bach's usage of 6/4 chords is pretty straightforward and in line with the way that they're taught in a harmony course, so the A here in the bass is a little suspicious. So I think with all the components here, A, C sharp, and then we take this sort of F into here, I think we have I think we sort of have like a 7/6, or maybe even like a 2 going on. And then this D sort of implies dominance going on here, so we'll just say 5/7 going on here. But everything's getting ready for a progression back to 1 anyways, so I think a dominant analysis, or marking it down as some type of dominant going on here, is the most appropriate. Then we have a passing for inversion of the chord. C, E, G, and A. Bach loves his minor 7 chords. This would be 1 in first inversion. And then it turns into 7/5/3 here as we get skips in the lower voices. And here we are getting ready for our cadence, D, A, F sharp, and A. That's a 5 chord. The little ornamental 7th and the tenor. And we cadence on 1. Perfect authentic cadence. So yeah, however the analysis is, whatever, I'd be interested to see what you consider the analysis for this section right here. I do think it's dominant, whether you call it 7 or 5, I don't know, but really it's just sort of a byproduct of counterpoint and passing tones or non-chord tones sort of meshing together to make the harmony kind of hard to pick out, but I hear it as dominant. Okay, we have F sharp, F sharp, D, A, and A. That is a D major triad over F sharp, so 5/6. Passing tone in the bass, D, A, E, and A. I think this D is a accented non-chord tone, and we're looking at the C here. C, A, E, and A. That makes a little bit more sense. That would be a 2/6 chord. And if we look ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of E minor. So we have to modulate at some point, and I think this is where we're modulating to E minor. This is now 4/6 because A minor is the subdominant in the key of E minor. And we get D sharps on the next beat, so I think we have, we're onto something here. B, A, D sharp, and D, so that would be a root position 5/7 chord. And here we get kind of a 6/5 going on in passing because the D sharp goes up, everything leaps up. We get G here, and then we get E, G, B, and G. That is a root position E minor triad. It's G. Whenever I see a non-chord tone that's not a result of stepwise motion, my brain sort of, my ears sort of, what is it? They prick up. And I'm just like, what's going on here? C, A, E, and G. Kind of like a 2-6-5 chord going on here. Or rather, a 4-7 chord. But really it happens in such a fleeting fashion that I'm just going to mark them as all non-chord tones. Okay. And this D as well is a non-chord tone. We have A, C, E, and F sharp. Again, Bach with his 2-6-5 chords, but remember, we're in the key of E minor now, so it's half diminished. And it turns into 7-5-3. So there's a little bit of parallelism going on with how the cadences are being played. In fact, really, they're kind of the same cadence going on here. A little bit of contrapuntal variation, but 2-6-5, 5. In anticipation, as opposed to anticipating the tonic, he just repeats the supertonic here, and here he anticipates the tonic, so some slight variation, but all in all a very similar cadence harmonically. This is one of the reasons why the analysis is really cool, because you can go through and say, wow, actually Bach, even though he's modulated, he's mirroring the chords. And I think that could also inform your performance practice, as these two phrases are related to one another. Even though the melody may not reflect it, other than maybe the rhythm and the length, harmonically, they have a lot of similarities. Okay. We kind of have like two related phrases. We have this one, which is related to this one, and this cadence, which is related to this cadence. Pretty cool. Alright, so let's move on to the next phrase. We, interestingly enough, have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B minor. So B minor is 2 sharps. We get the addition of C sharp, but otherwise it's the same notes as E minor. But we need to look for a modulation point. And because we're moving to another system and we have another E minor chord, I will go to the trouble of reanalyzing it just for the sake of looking, just moving to a new system and having to return to the side of the page could mean, you need a little refresher when you get here, as opposed to here where I won't reanalyze because you're kind of grouping all of this in all of this is in your vision, so no need to waste space or reanalyze. I don't know. So long as you're consistent with your analysis, I think really whatever your approach is fine. But this is what I like to do. And I think because C sharp is happening in pretty close proximity, I think this is our point of modulation to B minor. We're just going to send it. We're just going to say that this is now 4 in the key of B minor. And you could say that it happens here. You could say where that happens anywhere. I'd say that any time in between here and here is when the modulation happens. It's kind of like a modulation zone rather than a modulation point. You pick the point, but it occurs in a larger zone. So if there was a way for me to reflect a point of modulation in my analysis with like a bracket or something, I'd do that. But picking a point and committing to it, I think, is fine as well. We have a passing tone in the bass. That seems to be a theme. Then we have G, B, G, and E. Again, that's just a first inversion, not a 6 chord, but a 4-6 chord, because remember now we're in the key of B minor. We have another passing tone in the bass. Then we have B, B, F sharp, and D. There is our 1 chord. Another passing tone in the bass. Then we have D, B, F sharp, and D. What a really interesting tenor line, just holding it down. And this is just another first inversion triad that gets turned into a root position triad again with the skip in the bass. E, B, G, and C sharp. You know how Bach loves his 2 chords in first inversion. Remember, we're in a minor key, so it's 2-6-5, and it turns into 7-5-3. Again, there's patterns in the music, and it's really good to be aware of the fact that there are patterns in the music, as we can see that Bach's cadences are very formulaic. You can see that He's using the same structure for all of these, even though the melodies are different. Then we have F sharp, A sharp, F sharp, and C sharp in the melody. It's really interesting to get C sharp in the melody. Usually Bach imposes another key on a tonal melody and experiments, but when the melody does that for you, that's really fascinating. I wonder if he made that change or if he stayed true to the melody. I'd imagine that he'd stay true to the melody. I don't know why he'd change it, because really he was responsible for harmonizing the melodies, not composing the melodies for his liturgical music. But regardless, we have a 5 chord here. 2, 6, 5, 5, and then we cadence on 1. And we get a really interesting upper voice cadence here where the bass holds for 2 beats and the upper voice comes in twice, as opposed to what happens here where the bass leaps up and everyone cadences at the same time. Here, the 3 voices continue while the bass stays static. Okay. B. So if we look ahead, we have a cadence again in the key of G major. It's perfect authentic this time. And we need to look for a point of modulation. So where would that happen? Well, we could say that it happens here on this B minor triad. C is coming up pretty soon, C natural, so it's probably going to happen before there. So I'm thinking that it's happening right there. So let's go ahead and commit and say here. Draw the bracket in. This is now 3 in the key of G major rather than 1 in the key of B minor. We have some passing tones in the lower voices, and then we have G, B, G, and D. That's just a 1 chord. 3 and 1 are related by a third, so they have 2 tones in common, which is why you don't see them moved between one another, because there's not a lot of difference between them, but as you can see, they do move between each other. And it's largely semantics, you know. In the key of B minor, this would be 1 going to 6, which is just Roman numerals that are articulating the same thing. But we're going to 1 with a passing 7th in the bass. E, E, G, and C. That's a C major triad, first inversion, so a 4/6 chord. And then we have some interesting analysis here. How do we go about calling this? F sharp, D, A, and C. That could be a 5 chord, but we have G, D, A, and B. Well, if we are using the downbeat, G, D, A, and B, I would say this A is a non-chord tone, and we were kind of implying a 1 chord, but we go to E here, E, E, G, and B. Alright, let's go ahead and say that these 2 are suspensions over the bass. We have a 7. That's kind of cool. We have a kind of like a 5th over the bass here with G and D, and that resolves upwards. And then we have G up to A, so kind of like a 9/8 going on that gets interrupted because the bass changes on beat 8. So yeah, we're going to call that a 1 chord in first inversion. So a 1/6, and it kind of turns into 5/3 right there because we have all the components for a 1 chord here, just the inner voices are suspended. And I think one of the things that's pointing me in that direction is the fact that the inner voices, they're syncopated. And when something's syncopated, that will naturally create a contrapuntal harmony, right? If you have irregularity in the rhythms and other voices, if you syncopate something, the notes are going to get introduced on alternative beats. And when they get introduced on alternative beats, that's what creates counterpoint, is a variety in rhythm. So the fact that there's counterpoint introduced into the texture here, right here in this moment, it's no longer homophonic or homorhythmic, it's contrapuntal. We kind of have like some suspensions or just note the syncopations, and that's going to create interesting harmony that makes it difficult to discern what exactly is going on. But you have to use your best judgment and trust your ear entrust your eyes as well. And I'm going to go ahead and say that that's a tonic triad, even though two of the notes are not tonic triads, interestingly enough. But that being said, we have A, E, G, and C. Bach loves his 2/7 chords, and here he doesn't cease to continue to keep them in root position. We get 7/5/3 on the other beat, and I like to do that to sort of justify when there isn't a non-chord tone happening and the inversion of the chord changes. So the spelling changes, but the quality of the chord doesn't change. Then we have D, A, F sharp, and A. That's a root position D major triad, or 5. A little passing 7th, ornamental 7th, 1. This is the 1, 2, 2, 3. This is the 4th time we've seen this cadence, and we've seen the same pattern used in the bass 4 times. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, it's really cool. It's like almost the identical cadence to what we saw here. And that makes sense because the melody's very similar. Instead of B, D, C, and B, we have D, D, C, and B, then A, A, G, A, A, G. So it makes sense that the harmony is the same as well. He creates variety with the bass, but as you can see, the sections are related. So if you take a moment just to look at the melody and confirm that the harmony is also very similar, you can see that these two phrases are actually quite similar to one another. In a formal analysis, I would even say that these two phrases are the same. Maybe they're both B. This is B and this is B prime. Or maybe each of these phrases with the same cadential structure is also a part of B, and this is just B prime 3 times. But anywho, okay. Moving ahead, at the end we get a perfect authentic cadence in the tonic key, which is E minor, but we're cadencing on E major. Bach uses Picardy thirds quite a bit in his chorales, so here we have G, C sharp, E, and A. That is an A7 chord over G, so we know we're dealing with a 5/4/2, but of what? If we're still in the key of G major, that would be 5/4/2 of 5, as A is the dominant of D, but let's see what comes afterwards. F sharp, D, F sharp, and A. Well, that is a D chord. In this case, it's in first version, so we have 5/6. It goes where it's supposed to. We have some passing tones in the lower voices as well. Then we have D sharp, B, F sharp, and B. That is a B major triad over D sharp. So another dominant chord that's chromatic. This would be 5/6. And remember, we're modulating the E minor, so we're looking for a point. 5/6 of 6. We're looking for a point to modulate, and I think this is it. You could make the argument that maybe you modulate on D and say that that's 7, but it didn't really sound like it to me. It still sounded like E was in our ears, or G major was in our ears here. But when we see the dominant of the minor key we're modulating to, I think it's safe to say that we've modulated, given the context that's following. Then we get E, B, E, and G. It's a root position triad, a tonic triad, so 1 chord. Then we have C, C, E, and G, passing 6 going on. But we're not going to mark that because the chords are related by a third, so really they are similar to one another. The only thing that's really changing is the bass. And then we have F sharp, C, E, and F sharp. F sharp, C, E. Sorry, I had to double check there because this is not an F sharp, this is an A, right? This is another. Well, I mean, I wouldn't put it past Bach to put another 2/6/5 chord that turns into a 7/5/3 on the next and. Then we have B, F sharp, D, and F sharp. It's a 5 chord, and he's doubling the 5th on the triad here, which is interesting. A little ornamental 7th there. I remember uppercase 1 because it's a perfect authentic cadence, but with the Picardy third, the G sharp. All in all, the chorale's really interesting. I'd say that, I say really interesting proportionately to the other chorales. one of the more middle of the road, maybe even lesser than the middle of the road in terms of interest, but it has its quirks. And really, I'd say the most interesting part of the chorale is its structure. The fact that that Bach really uses the same cadence a bunch. And when you go back and listen to the chorale again, you're going to hear that, and it's going to be kind of like an aha moment, like, oh, these are all just variations on the same cadence. You know, the alto's doing the same thing in pretty much all of them, except right here. But recycling the same harmonies doesn't mean that the rhythms have to be the same as well. So if you're into vocal writing and you write mostly tonal music, this could be a really nice template for you to, you know, harmonize sections in various keys while keeping the cadential structure the same. All in all, it's a very quaint chorale. The melody's very pretty. The C sharp in the melody too, it's a modal melody, so Bach modulating to B minor is a very elegant way to impose his tonal faculties on the chorale, or the melody rather, and harmonizing it. So really cool stuff. That being said, I think that's all I have to analyze for today. I enjoyed it. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and thank you so much for supporting the channel, everyone. Take care.